Hello and welcome to Movie Night with Andy and Gabe. I am Andy,
I'm Gabe.
and he's peeking like a son of a gun.
Oh shit. Real am I really? Okay, I'm gonna move that microphone back there. Yeah, we're doing our very first ever movie night movie discussion kind of thing. And the movie happens to be my favorite love story of all time, my favorite dark comedy of all time, one of my favorite comedies of all time, and just all around one of my favorite movies of all time, Buffalo 66.
And I hadn't seen this before. We originally planned to do an exchange where Gabriel watched the musical Assassins and I was going to watch Buffalo 66. And Gabriel watched Assassins and we did a show about it on another channel a long time ago. And I was meant to watch Buffalo 66, but finding it in the
Mm.
UK was a massive, massive struggle. And there was a brief window where it was available on Amazon Prime, apparently. And I was about to watch it, and then I clicked on it thinking, oh, it's available now. And it was gone. And I don't know if I misread, but either way, um, I had to go to a shady black market dealer in the dark depths of Whitechapel. He pulled a VHS copy out of his trench coat. I dusted off my old VHS. I did a little prayer, and then
It was from one of those websites in Whitechapel that your mom warned you about.
absolutely, absolutely. So
You know, the funny
yeah,
thing is when you say that, I watched it. I actually watched it again last night because I couldn't sleep for shit. I've actually been up all night, so keep that in mind as we talk to each other here. And so I watched it on Amazon Prime. If you had gotten a VPN, you could have set your location to the United States and watched it on Amazon Prime. So keep that in mind for next time. Um, but so watching it on Amazon Prime, it
sorry
was
if
the
you've gone
first
and got a
time.
VPN sponsor for us and I didn't know about it. I will be.
Sign up for your free trial of Shit Shark Wire. Shit Shark Wire allows you to stream anything everywhere, even for yeah, fuck whatever. Yeah. Actually, let's start our own VPN called that. Um, but for seeing that movie on Amazon Prime, the very last time, the only format I have ever watched that movie in, aside from Amazon Prime, was on VHS. That's how old it and I am.
I kind of miss VHS. I have a collection of old Godzilla VHSs, and on one hand, they're VHSs, but on the other
Yeah.
hand, they're VHSs,
You
and
know,
it's just
yeah.
something cool about like popping it in and like not. I'm remembering a time before my back ached.
Yeah. Well, it's like somebody made a good point. Like cassette tapes, there's actually degrees to which cassette tapes can sound pretty good. Vinyls does sound really good, in ways that like CDs and digital and stuff doesn't. VHS was just a shit format that we used because we had nothing else. And as soon as it was obsolete, fucking goodbye and good riddance. The only thing good about VHS is that so much is archived on it because so much got transferred over to tape.
Yeah, and yeah, VHS was really really easy to record the TV with.
Hmm.
One day, this is not at all related to the film, but one day I was round my friend's house and his nan was having a clear out of old VHS tapes that are like, and she'd record the TV, so she'd record a TV show, but then just leave it recording, so like all of like BBC for that day, like
Oh,
6 hours
yeah.
of programming on there, and we watched it, and then we like we put together and we worked out what day of the year she recorded that based on the programming that was on at that
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. You probably got 10 or 12 Doctor Who episodes of the BBC like set on fire the master tapes of and fucking threw in the garbage.
So Buffalo 66.
So I want to lead into this by telling you that just a little bit of background of my experience with this movie entering my consciousness, and then I want to hear what you think. I'm just incredibly curious what you thought of it. So my brother, who some people may have known as Confused Matthew, he had a mega crush on Christina Ricci when we were teenagers. And so anything and everything that Christina Ricci was in, he would watch, which is the only reason that I even knew about this movie, because she happened to be in it. That person and his like obsession with her annoyed me at the time. I look back on it really fondly now because it's like a thing when we were kids or whatever. But it really annoyed me at the time. And she really annoyed me at the time. So, and despite all that, I absolutely adored this movie, which will give an indication of what an impression it made on me, that it was able to overcome my annoyance with one of the actors in it. To set the stage for the influence that this had on myself and my brother, these were the memes that never were, because nobody saw this film but us. He and I took many pictures in bowling alleys and arcades with our girlfriends, where we sat there completely stoically while they were smiling. If you got on our bad side, we would do very bad, very evil things. We couldn't drive a shifter car, and we definitely spanned time together. And none of that stuff was ever known the reference of by anybody. So that was always pretty. That was just him and me. And that movie created the entire vernacular of my brother and I in the late '90s and early 2000s. So just for that little background. So what did you think? What did you think of the film?
Okay, so here's where I came at it, right? I had two things that I really, really liked about it. And those two things were the cinematography done by Lance Accord, which we'll get into later, because I've got some interesting stuff that I found out about that. And I love Christina Ricci in this movie. I think she's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that Angelica Houston was in it until after seeing the film and scrolling through like the Wikipedia page, and then
You
going,
wouldn't have noticed her, huh?
No, so it was a little bit of an Addams Family reunion as well.
It never even occurred to me until I saw it the other day. Hold on, this is Morticia and Wednesday in a movie again. That I've seen that movie 100 times. It never clicked with me until like yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love her, and I like the cinematography a lot. Other than that,
Mhm.
I don't think this is very good. And the reason I don't think it is very good is because from the opening few minutes, there's a scene where he goes into a dance class toilet, and the gay guy glances at him, what didn't even look at him long enough for me to have picked up on the idea that the gay guy was looking at him. And then Vincent Gallo's character Billy immediately goes, "What are you looking at me for? What are you looking at me for? Don't look at me." And then the gay guy goes, "But it's so big." And then Gallo slaps him and pushes him out of the thing.
Yeah.
And then I remembered, this is written and directed and starring him, and I thought, this movie's going to be an ego trip for him. And the more it went on, the more I was pretty sure of myself that this was a film about validating whatever insecurities this director has, because this character is a piece of shit, and this character is rewarded for his behavior, and this character's behavior never goes never gets examined, not once. The film's not critical of how he behaves at all. It's just everything. It's never his fault. It's never his fault. And the entire movie sort of goes along with this until eventually I'm supposed to believe that Christina Ricci, who has been abducted by him over the course of a day that would be traumatic by any other standards, falls in love with him. But I don't think it's a joke. because of the way everything is framed. There is no humor in her being like, "I'm in love with you. I think you're a great guy." There is no humor in it. Like it's not played as a joke. There's no like there's nothing to lead me to think that he didn't just think he was writing the next great drama. Yeah, and I think the story really, really falls flat. But yeah, that's where I am with it at the moment.
Okay, okay. Well, that gets somewhat into the second topic that I wanted to talk about with this movie, which was death of the author. Because you're right about so much of that. I mean, obviously, this is a person who thinks that gay people are people who wait in bathrooms for a guy to come in and then tells him, "Relax, I just want to look at your dick." Like that. Of course, that's what a gay person is. But so yeah, there are a lot of really problematic stuff in this movie. Vincent Gallo has a lot of really problematic views about women and gay people and everybody, and a lot of that did make it into this movie. However, I don't think any of those things were um, portrayed quite the way you took it. At least I didn't take them that way. His abuse of that person in the bathroom, I don't think that was portrayed as a good thing, nor was any of his bad behavior. You're right that he's never. What was the word you used?
We'll say
He's never.
criticized.
Yeah, he's never
Yeah.
criticized. He's never called to account for his behavior by her, but he was criticized for his behavior constantly when he was a little kid. This is the thing, the explanation for his bad behavior is in the dinner scene. So this here's how I and by the way, when I saw this movie in 1990 fucking 8 when it was new, I had no idea who Vincent Gallo was. I had no idea about any of this stuff. Didn't have a chance of knowing any of this stuff. So none of that kind of affected my seeing of this movie. Here's the movie that I saw. This guy is a neurotic dickhead loser, an idiot, and but he's that way for a reason. And the aspect of the movie that explains that behavior is basically the same route that A Christmas Carol takes with Ebenezer Scrooge. He's like this because he has lost the ability to introspect. Because when he one of the things that I one of the reasons that I think this is a great movie is the way that it deals with childhood trauma. And the trauma that Billy Brown receives as a child is a kind of trauma that is almost never portrayed in movies, which is neglect. The vast majority of the trauma that he receives as a child is just his neglectful parents. And that was so true of so many people that I've known. I think it's true of many people. And it's something that doesn't get talked about very much, and I think it was portrayed really accurately. And so he had two neglectful parents that didn't really care about him. He was going through these normal developmental issues where he liked girls for the first time, but he was kind of weird and he didn't know how to talk to them, and he had nobody there to guide him through any of those experiences. And while he was experiencing these things, the only thing that he could do was escape. So he made up this fake world where he had this fake girlfriend and he had this fake life that he had to constantly convince himself of and other people of, and his only friend is somebody who is so incapable of standing up to him, that's the only sense in which he can think that he's competent. And through this fantasy and this tendency to act without thinking and act on this fantasy life, he does this stupid thing where he makes this stupid bet and he has to go to jail, and all of these things culminate in him getting to the point where he's going to kill himself and somebody else, because you're absolutely right, he can't take responsibility for any of this stuff. But he doesn't. Here's the problem: he doesn't need to take responsibility for his actions. That isn't the thing that he needs to learn how to do. He needs to learn how to examine himself. He needs to learn to make peace with his past. He needs to learn how to introspect. And the Christina Ricci's character facilitates that so perfectly. She doesn't she puts up with his bullshit to a point. There are points in that movie where he goes too far and she lets him know it, but she puts up with this shit in order to get to that core that I just described. And she does it by just not leaving. Her position is, I see who you are. I see, somehow she's able to have this X-ray vision that cuts through all of that bullshit to where she sees the real him. And she needs to get to that. She needs to get him to that place. And the way that she does that is by, I'm here, I'm not leaving, I'm not judging you. She allows him to get to that point. And throughout the whole course of that movie, she has the role of the dog trainer who gets the abused dog, where you don't yell at it and, and be abusive in your own right toward it. You let it develop trust, which is another thing that he has a serious problem with. I found it really remarkable. This is ostensibly a love at first sight kind of a situation, but it's more like an I get you at first sight. Neither one of these people, he's not really manipulating her. He was using her as a means to an end, but that whole kidnapping thing, they both forget about that like really early on in the movie. That's something that just kind of gets forgotten about by both of them, and it becomes about her saving him internally, which she does. I was reminded of something that Marilyn Manson said in the movie Bowling for Columbine, when he was asked, if the Columbine killers were here alive today, what would you say to them? And his answer was, I wouldn't say anything. I would listen to what they had to say, which is what nobody did. That's exactly what she does to save this person. And her kindness and patience and empathy saved two people. And that's all it took. So there's a concept where that most people just want to be heard, and people had in the past told him that he was a fuck up and he was this, and his father obviously was constantly on him. He didn't need that. He needed somebody to sit there and let him get to the point where he could acknowledge his pain and acknowledge his trauma and talk about it. And it took several tries for him just to be able to be in the same space with another person and to trust this person. Here's the thing, and this is the last thing I'll say about it, and I'll let you say what you think. When you've had a screwed up life and you're kind of screwed up as a result, it's nice to have a message that, don't worry, somebody out there is gonna get you. I think that's a great message. I thought it was a great love story.
So here's where I disagree, because I disagree quite strongly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall them ever really opening up to one another at all. I guess the closest you get to it is when she insists on sitting in the bath with him. And
well, it was the scene on the bed where she just sat there and he started talking about Wendy Balsam and how he felt when he was in school, and he hated school and he hated church, and this fantasy made his life go by.
But what I mean is that I don't ever see the part where they get each other. We don't know anything about her at all. And I think the reason we don't know anything about her at all is because Vincent Gallo doesn't really care about her. He just wants her to be a prop by which to explore his character. and that does bother me because I feel like when the relationship between the two of them is so one-sided, like I'll compare it to Beauty and the Beast. A lot of dumb people in this world call Beauty and the Beast Stockholm syndrome, even though one,
Okay.
Stockholm syndrome doesn't exist. That's not a real thing. Two is that Belle doesn't like the Beast until he stops acting like a brute, and then they start to meet in the middle. We don't get this developing relationship with them. Now, Beauty and the Beast has an advantage in that it happens over the course of like quite a while. This is like one night in their lives, and I just couldn't buy into her going from being abducted to, if she does see something in him, if she sees something in him other than pity, which I think is quite clear that she probably pities him because he's pathetic. I didn't see the point where that came together, for me at least. But
Yeah,
I do think she's fantastic in it.
That really cinches the whole thing because you don't. Okay, this is one of the other things that I thought was great about the film. She, first of all, her abduction. I want to be really clear about this. This is a movie. It's a fantasy. It's not reality. It's not okay to kidnap people on the off chance that maybe they'll be ethereal enough to like go along with it and get that you don't really mean to do right. That's not okay. But in the movie, that she didn't buy that. She never bought any of his. That was just another example of him putting on airs. You could even see like there's a really quick scene when he's yelling at his mom on the payphone and she's in the bathroom. It cuts to her for a second. She's like, "What is with this guy?" She's already curious about where this is going to take her. We do know about her, but we only know this is I'm a big fan of show don't tell. We know who she is through her actions and through her looks and through her looking at the camera, through her reactions to things. And we don't know about her through her talking about herself because her the task that she sets about is letting him talk about himself. And I can see kind of where your irritation is coming in because you're seeing this as Vincent Gallo talking about himself, which that's a whole other thing that we can get into. This is why I think it's
we'll do that one later.
to talk. Yeah, we need to talk about Death of the Author in this movie for exactly the reasons that you're talking about. But in the context of this movie, she's not. She certainly wasn't submissive. She was everything that she was doing by choice. I personally think that that's kind of what that tap dancing scene in the bowling alley meant. She kind of absorbs what's going on around her and plays around with it and sort of exists in it and is curious about other weird kind of offbeat parts of people's lives.
See, when you say show don't tell, I agree. I agree. Obviously, if you can do something by showing it, I agree. You can understand some of her behavior through her performance. Like I say, Richie's fantastic, but you don't know what informs her character's decisions really to do that. Like it's what I say is like I see what you're getting at, but I think it's a stretch. Not that you're stretching. Yeah, sure. I don't think you're stretching, but for the movie, I think it's a little bit more of a stretch, and I think it's because you don't get as much time before bang he's kidnapping her. Yeah, I think there was moments there that could have maybe had more time to breathe and have more time to see her kind of processing stuff that is going on. But like when it's very rare that she leaves him and we see really what she's doing. And I think that, say for example, when she wants to leave and go to the bathroom, we don't see what goes on. We see her come back, but like we don't really see her. Like we don't see the wires crossing in her head, the cogs turning, and she's like processing what's going on. Um,
Right.
which I think is something that would would have improved the film, because I can I don't know if I'd ever be able to be convinced with the with her falling in love with him and being like, please don't leave, but at the very least I think I could have maybe got into her head a little bit more if I'd seen her a little bit more on her own. But there are
But
things
you
that they do, like cinematography, in terms of its
uh
cinematography, that I think help
mhm.
put you in her shoes more, that I'll get into later when I start flicking
Yeah,
through like the scenes and that.
sure.
But yeah, that's where I am at the moment.
But you see, she wasn't saying please don't leave for her. She was saying please don't leave for him. She knew somehow that he was choosing between life and death. He was going to choose between acting on his worst nature or embracing a better nature that he never thought he could have. That's what she was asking him to do. It wasn't don't leave. As for what informs her motivation, the reason I'm glad that I personally, this might just be my thing, but I'm kind of glad that we don't know that, because the thing that informs her motivation is love. And love, like, what did Romeo and Juliet ever see in each other? We don't know. Love doesn't make sense. I like love stories where love doesn't make sense. Where you say, what in the world would these two? Did you ever see? I know this was really popular in your country and it got over here. Did you ever see the movie Harold and Maude?
No, I haven't actually.
Oh,
God,
okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. But you know what I'm talking about, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
this really odd, but yeah. I can't stand love stories where it's like, oh, there's this girl and she has all these things and that are great about her, and this guy discovers all these things. A lot of the time I feel that that's kind of false, because love involves accepting things that are fucked up about another person, and you rarely see that in actual love stories. And you that's it's a it was very realistically informed here. What informs her motivation is love, and it's not it's she gets him. Whatever's down, whoops, shit, see, I'm getting really excited. Whatever's down there, when you get past all the bullshit, is something that she thinks is valuable and deserves to exist. And just it's love. What informs her motivation is love. And I thought that was I appreciated that being unspoken.
So I want to talk a little bit about the the other thing that I liked other than Christina Ricci, which was
Mm-hmm.
the cinematography.
Mm.
So um, something that this film does that you don't see very often is conversations are shot from inside the conversation. Usually you see a conversation shot in a film and you could see me talking to Gabriel, and you see Gabriel's reactions to what I'm saying, and you can see the back of my head and a bit of my shoulder. That's a very common way to shoot a conversation. Conversations in this film are shot nearly entirely from inside the conversation space. You see pretty much what the character would see were they a camera instead of a pair of eyes.
Right.
So, for example, when he is threatening Christina Ricci in the car, saying that here's what you're going to do. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. You're going to make my parents like me. You're not going to show me up. If you do anything bad, then I'm going to hurt you. And doing this thing. You
And I'll
see,
never talk to you again.
yeah, and you see her the whole time. The
Mhm.
camera is always focused on her, rather than him saying it, which is interesting.
Right.
But what's really interesting is that you get no look in at all. And when she is talking to him, you largely see his face and his reactions instead, which I think is really interesting. And when you go to that dinner scene, and they're all gathered around the table, you get this weird, like, this is a tiny table and they are trying to make this table look bigger, and you get all sorts of kind of funny continuity errors where like the glass just disappears and things like that, where these characters will shoot Gallo's perspective, and you see Angelica Houston, Christina Ricci, and his dad's character, who's the actor's name has gone straight out of my head. But you see the three of them, and then it will flip back to her perspective, and you'll see the two of them on the opposite sides, and then him, and then from the dad's perspective of the three of them. So they really make the most out of this tiny table to get like everything they can out of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite work because there's lots of like silly continuity errors, and it sometimes just comes off like a little jarring. But to a degree, that and the fact that this movie constantly jump cuts, it may be an intentional sort of thing to like add like a sense of unease and like jitteriness, or it could just be that the film's rough around the edges. But that's something that I wanted to talk about because I thought that's very interesting. You don't see that done very often, and it contrasts a lot because the film's presentational style is this weird mix of being kind of surrealist and out there when Christina Ricci does her tap dance scene, with like very, very naturalistic performances, to the point where like I at points wondered if there was a script at all or if they were just like riffing.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that was really, really interesting, because that's something you see very, very, very rarely. And the debate is, was that Vincent Gallo, the director's decision, or was that the direction of Lance Accord, the director of photography, who went on to do movies like, probably most famously recently, Where the Wild Things Are, which is a beloved film now. But I didn't know if you had anything in particular, like in terms of like opinion. Yeah.
So, this was a movie that I categorized at the time as the post-Pulp Fiction. I want to make a movie with a lot of screwy cuts and playing with time and stuff. It was the only one that I saw at that during that period that I really liked. I did in fact notice that it was as if they had handwritten a little sticky note that they kept on the camera that said, or on the editing machine where they said, "Don't ever go to coverage." I whether as for whether or not that was Vincent Gallo himself or the DP, I think it was probably him. He seemed to, what I understand about the production of this movie, which is a whole topic in itself that we'll get into, is that he basically ended up micromanaging just about everything. I do have a question about that, in the same way that you did about the screenplay, of how much this was Vincent Gallo in the screenplay and how much it was Alison Bagnall, who's gone on to do other indie films that seem to have the same quirky nature to them. So it's funny, we both ended up asking, looking at the production of this, how much of this was him. With the with those techniques that you're talking about, my personal opinion is probably a lot. He seems to be the kind of person who isn't averse to outside visions, as long as he thinks they're like good ones. So probably a little bit of the DP, but in this particular film, I would guess it was mostly him.
You see, the reason I'm curious on that is because there's a specific thing that he says as a filmmaker, because we'll get into the behind the scenes stuff now. So yeah, Vincent Gallo was very abusive on the set of this film.
Yep.
And keep in mind, Christina Ricci has been very public about being an anorexic and her struggles with anorexia as a condition. And in this movie, she shot this when she was 17, and
Mm-hmm.
not to be insulting towards her, but she's bigger in this film than what people are probably used to seeing her as being.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing wrong with how she
No,
looks.
sure. I think she's beautiful in it, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, of course, of course. But he routinely made inappropriate comments about her weight, saying that she was fat,
Mm-hmm.
saying she weighed too much. Now, keep in mind, he was a grown man in his 30s, and she was
Yes.
17. Like, I don't know what kind of guy,
She,
like,
I couldn't. If I can just focus on that for a second, I had no idea. Probably because I was exactly the same age when this came out. I had absolutely no idea that she was a minor when they shot this. What the fuck were they doing, getting away from putting her in that outfit and focus it? There were like these weird, creepy, elongated focusing on her cleavage and
yeah,
just parts of her
yeah.
body would have just made me. I didn't know this then, and I was 17 at the time then, so couldn't have bothered me then. But as a 40, soon to be 41-year-old man now, I'm like looking at that, like, God, this is just creepy.
Yeah, I didn't think it was appropriate. Like, say, like, the movie adaptation of Phantom of the Opera, Emmy Rossum was 16 in that film,
Mhm.
and some of the way that Gerard Butler like handles her in the film, the way he puts his hands on her belly, on her chest, stuff like that, I could see how you'd be um, uncomfortable. But when you hear stories about that film, you don't hear Emmy Rossum saying anything bad about Gerard Butler. It seems like
Yeah.
she was just quite young when they shot it. He was quite a bit older than her, and they were just professionals doing what they could with an awkward situation that they probably shouldn't have been put in. But this camera leers at her,
Yes.
and I didn't
In a
feel that
really,
the I
yeah.
didn't feel that Phantom of the Opera, and probably because Phantom of the Opera was directed by a gay man, but I didn't feel that the
Hmm.
camera leered at Emmy Rossum in
Well,
that
and
film.
also Phantom of the Opera wasn't a one-man show where one guy was making most of those kinds of decisions. I didn't like the way that Ben Gazzara put his hands on her in some of those scenes. I thought was kind of weird too.
Yeah, yeah, it was
Um,
it was yeah, I there was a couple moments where when he took her into the back room to do a song, I was like, is he gonna put the moves on her? I was not sure where
Yeah,
it was going.
one would get the sense that that might happen because I mean, his character was supposed to be a creep, and I guess you can't really get away with that because that's what they're trying to convey. But just the fact that she was a minor when that happened, there were some of this
Yeah,
I was like, was this legal? Like when they actually kiss each other, like he's 30,
yeah,
what was
like
he, 36 when this happened? She's 17. Was that even legal? Like fuck.
I have
Mhm.
no judgment at all on Ben Gazzara. You know, he's just doing his job,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
for
that.
sure.
But like that is an uncomfortable situation to be put in. I also happen to know this was the first film that Christina Ricci worked on without her mum being present on
Oh,
set.
and her minders, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so that was that was weird. But
What a first experience as an adult, as a soon to be adult woman working in this industry. It's no
some
wonder
guy
that she, yeah,
yeah, some guy constantly berating your weight, screaming and shouting at you because you can't drive a stick shift when you've only been
yeah.
legally allowed to drive for like 12 months, if
Mm-hmm.
that. And
Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
yeah, weird. And I do remember an interview that I read as I was looking into the back, like looking back through this, where Vincent Gallo said that he had a crush on Christina Ricci all his life. To which I say, mate,
Uh,
don't say that. Don't say that. I don't care how you meant it. Just don't say it.
like you were close to my age when she wasn't even like a legal adult yet. That's fucking creepy. The guy, okay, Vincent Gallo is a remarkable piece of shit human being.
Oh wait, sorry. Before we get
Um,
into that, there's just a
yeah, yeah,
point
yeah,
that
please, yeah, please.
I got completely sidetracked from this. Right. So
Okay.
Christina Ricci had a bad time
Mm.
directing doing this film, and Vincent Gallo described her as an ungrateful cunt and a puppet who just did exactly what he said her to do. said for
Can
her
I
to
please
do.
say something? Can I please
Yeah.
say something about that real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know more than me because you actually are a professional actor and have acted in things and make films and whatnot. So I could be totally mistaken here, but when you're an actor, aren't you supposed to do what the director tells you to do?
Yeah, it's a partnership. The director does not have the ability to make you do exactly what they want you to do, but the director, you talk with the director and you're like, I think you sort of do this and this is what I'm going for. Like Willem Dafoe says that he likes working with auteur directors because he, as an actor, likes to help a creative person get their vision on screen, and that is how he views himself as an actor. So like it's
Right.
a collaboration where, yeah, the director tells you how they want you to kind of do a scene and what they think your character's going for, but the director doesn't puppeteer the actor. A lot of the time a director can't puppeteer an actor because actors are often higher profile in the movie industry than what a film director is, which was
Mhm.
the case in this movie. Christina Ricci was undoubtedly the A side of this in terms of notoriety.
And so was
Um,
Angelica Houston, who also couldn't fucking stand the guy.
Yep, and what I thought was he called her like a puppet and basically
Mhm.
attributed all her good performance to him. The reason I wondered about the work he did in terms of the cinematography, how much of these creative photography decisions were him versus the DOP, is
Mhm.
because he said that Lance Accord uh, couldn't shoot a film to save his life,
Yep.
and he said that all Lance Accord did was push the buttons. And
Mhm.
I do not believe that because it's Lance Accord. And I do not believe that is true. And I just think it's really interesting that he said the exact same thing about both of them,
Mhm.
which is why I wondered. But like we were gonna, unless you have anything in particular to
No,
say on
no,
that, like
I actually do. You're right about that. I hadn't thought about that. He does tend to say that people were just doing his thing when they're clearly Christina Ricci was a 17-year-old who had never worked by herself before without her mom, and she was an unbelievable pro to the point where, and so good in this film, made this film. He was thinking of what's her name from The Fifth Element? Um, oh fuck, god damn it.
oh god, what have you done? What have you done me like
Uh,
this for?
fuck. Mia Jovovich. He
Yes.
was thinking Mia Jovovich and a couple other people, and none of them could have done what. This is, and so the whole death of the author thing is important here because I think it was that uncomfortableness and that real tension that came through in a lot of these scenes that you wouldn't have had maybe with a different actress. But for him to say that she was just a puppet that did whatever she told when she showed up and made this movie what it was while putting up with this bullshit that she had never experienced before without supervision, which she had never not had before, is just I can't even put words to it.
And she is
The,
still diplomatic about this to this day.
mm-hmm,
She did an interview in 2015, which I guess is not to this day, but it's the most recent one I could find of her talking about the film, where
yeah.
she essentially said, he's an asshole, but I do think he's talented, and I think it's a shame that people don't want to see his work anymore because he's such an asshole. Where I differ with her on this is that I I don't whatever whatever outstanding talent that people say they see in Vincent Gallo's film, I am not personally seeing. I think he's obviously someone that can put a film together, but uh, like when he was likened, like people said your films are a bit like David Lynch's, and he said that he hated being compared to David Lynch because he didn't like David Lynch. In which case,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't want to be compared to David Lynch, maybe don't have an out of nowhere tap dance scene in the middle of your film.
And if you
But
don't want to
like,
be compared to David Lynch, like you're obviously just like he. I mean, who does he like? Who does this guy like? He
yeah,
doesn't like anybody.
but what I mean is like, say like,
Yeah.
I know that David Lynch is an acquired taste for a lot of people, but uh he's a fantastic filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And the one who kept coming back in my mind when thinking about Vincent Gallo and his place in the film industry was Mel Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
Mel Gibson is very unpopular with a lot of people. Mel Gibson films, the films he still directs films, they still release, they still get distributed, and they still get good reviews, in spite of Mel Gibson being very unpopular. And Vincent Gallo fans that I was reading from seem to think that it's because he's so conservative, and
No,
that's why no one likes him. To which
no.
my thoughts were, no, I think that Mel Gibson, despite being very unpopular with a lot of people, is unquestionably a good filmmaker.
Yeah.
And that's why his stuff still gets made. But Vincent Gallo can't get a film together. And I know Mel Gibson
Well,
has far more social standing. He was in Mad Max, he was in Lethal Weapon, and Vincent Gallo was more of an indie guy. But I don't know. I don't know.
well, here's what I think about that.
Why can't he get indie
Vince,
budgets?
because okay,
Yeah.
Vincent. This is the Vincent Gallo v. Mel Gibson. This is really two different things. Mel Gibson gets in trouble because he makes private statements that become public that turn into scandals. Whatever most all of the things that Mel Gibson has gotten in trouble for were said privately or recorded privately. He keeps when he has interviews, he's cussed out interviewers and stuff before, but he doesn't publicly like shit talk people. Vincent Gallo has a big mouth and he shit talks people who control whether he can make and distribute a movie. A shit talks them publicly. So when these people hear this on the radio or wherever it is he's saying it, they're like, okay, fuck you. We're not gonna then fuck you. You go someplace else to make your movie. That's why Vincent Gallo, in addition to the fact that, I, in addition, I don't know. I, I get what you're saying. I think that's the primary reason that he can't really get a film off the ground. It could also be that he's just not a very good filmmaker unless he has other people around him to make the film good. I personally, the funny thing is, I haven't seen anything else that he's ever made, so I wouldn't be able to really comment on that. Maybe I should. That's actually a really good question.
He only made, to my knowledge, two other films. One of which he couldn't get distributed and just sits in a box somewhere. And the other one was the very infamous film Brown Bunny, where he got the girl from Kids to actually, for real, give him a blowjob on camera.
Yeah, yeah, that I do know. And
yeah,
yeah, good. Like, and I know he said he wanted to make like a pornographic movie that wasn't pornography; it was more a movie than actual some weird thing like that. Yeah, I don't know, but I don't know. The guy is just Brown Bunny. Did I see this? I think I saw this. Oh no! It was when Roger Ebert said it was the worst film ever to be at the Cannes Film Festival. That's why I know it from. Yeah, that's right.
Vincent Gallo responded by calling Roger Ebert fat, and Roger Ebert said, "Yes, but I could lose weight, and you will have always made the Brown Bunny."
Ah, that's great.
There's this video, and it's titled "Vincent Gallo Destroys Critics to Their Faces." And what this video actually shows is Vincent Gallo surrounded by film critics, where he sits there wringing his hands, staring at the floor, mumbling and just kind of being a little bit belligerent, but like not too belligerent. And then these film critics around him kind of go, "What are you talking about?" And I just love how the video is titled versus what's actually in the video. He did not have quite as big a balls as what the title makes it sound, and that was where he was saying like he was saying that he was annoyed that there was a film in Sundance that he thought was TV movie quality, but it got into Sundance and it got praise because there was gay people in it. and he said that he had a problem with that because having a gay person in the film doesn't make the film better. Now, I agree that it is true that having a gay person in a film does not affect the quality of the film, but I don't think that's why Vincent Gallo had a problem with it.
Neither do I. And did anybody say that was why the film was good?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of just like yeah, like he was kind of frustrated, and he goes he hates when he sees left wing politics creeping into a film because he says he can kind of feel it. But like, if I want to use that logic, he does the exact same thing with conservative politics in Buffalo '66. You know, the film.
Yeah, several
The
times.
the film has a really homophobic scene where the character is never criticized for his homophobia. It never comes up. It could be taken out of the film altogether, and nothing would change. Because the only thing it does is get her to say to him, "Watch your mouth," but he swears like a sailor the entire film anyway.
Well, I think
Like
she was upset at the. But
yeah,
one could say it was particularly jarring for her, the homophobic part of it.
yeah.
I would submit that it's possible that that was a consequence for his homophobia, and that was her calling that out in the film. But
But that
that's
means
just
that means he gets a girlfriend that finally understands him because he slapped that gay man in the toilet.
well, because she understood the genesis of why he's the kind of person that would do that.
That's still
And
rewarding it.
fixes it. Oh, I don't think it's rewarding it. I don't think it's a reward when somebody acknowledges your faults and lets you come to why you have
It
them. I
doesn't,
don't
but it
think that's
doesn't
a reward.
redeem or fix his homophobia. We
I
never
don't
see him
know.
interact with another
It's
gay
not about.
person
No,
ever
but it's
again.
not about. Well, hold on though. It's not about redemption. This isn't a redemption story. He isn't redeemed. He's forgiven by so he's. It's not redemption. It's forgiveness. It's getting him to acknowledge where this stuff comes from and somebody finally listening to him about it. That's why it's not about redemption. It's not a redemption story. He doesn't have a redemption arc.
I
He
know, I
has
know
a
he doesn't. I know he doesn't. But
yeah.
he doesn't have like a criticize me arc. He
But
has a woe is me arc. But what
but
I
it,
wanted
but it's
to
yeah.
sorry, what I wanted to get into is because people go like he people just don't like him because he's a conservative, and
No, no.
I'm like, my God, there's being a conservative like
Yeah.
Tim Allen is a conservative.
Yeah.
Vincent Gallo said he wants to maintain the right to refuse the sale of his sperm to those of extremely dark complexions. He doesn't want to be part of that type of integration. And he'll discount it to those who are naturally blonde or related to a mid-century German soldier.
One wonders if perhaps conservatives who might claim him are kind of telling on themselves. If I was a conservative, I wouldn't identify any of that shit with my like political views. He's not a conservative. He's just a weirdo.
But he did say that he would sell his sperm to Jewish women because he thought that would give him a better chance of getting good reviews.
Right.
Which
Right.
is just him being facetious, obviously. But
For sure, and which is the only way that he can get attention. Yeah, and he does have this really odd sort of attention seeking, but not in the way that a filmmaker would try to seek attention by like making films, but more like making really really out there statements on the radio and stuff. I don't know. He's just a fucking weirdo. I take your point about so I thought this was a great film. You clearly didn't think it was a great film, but if it was a great film, I take your point that I had said earlier that I really hate having to acknowledge that he made a great film. If it was a great film, I think you're right. I think he probably had the least to do with why it was great, if it was.
I definitely thought that it could be something that was great in spite of him. I know
Yeah.
that sometimes a filmmaker is just on. Dan Gilroy made a film called Nightcrawler starring Jake Gyllenhaal about a guy who goes out and he records late night news, car crashes, murders, things like that.
Yeah.
It goes out and records the bodies, and it's about him constantly getting pushed and pushed more into like dark territory, all for the sake of glory. But Dan Gilroy, God bless him, has never quite been that on since with any of his films in the way they've been received critically. Sometimes a filmmaker's just on, and that was their great film, and
Yeah.
they didn't do as much of that. So I know it happens.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
when you look at the creative people involved in Buffalo 66, and you look at all of what they did after,
Yes.
he didn't have another film that was praised at all. He never had a successful follow up to Buffalo 66. Not
And
once.
they all had successful follow-ups in their own careers and their
All
own
of
fields,
them.
including this Alison Backnell person who I want to see her movies now to see if this was more her than him. The stuff, I was obviously the stuff about this was obviously, and I wouldn't have known this at the time, which is probably why we had very different experiences with this, because you can't get away from this now. But at the time, didn't know anything about the guy and didn't care. It was just a movie that I was watching. This was obviously autobiographical to a large degree. He's from Buffalo. His parents really were like that. That scene, you probably know this already, but that was shot in his actual house. His childhood
I didn't
home.
know that was shot in his actual house. That's really
That was
interesting.
his actual childhood home, yeah. And yeah, so that there was obviously there was a degree to which this was autobiographical.
But I knew he
so
paid
those,
for it out of his own pocket too.
yes, he did, and he only made like, what did he only make, like $1 million or something? He made a profit, but not much.
When you
yeah,
factor in marketing, he genuinely might not have made a profit at all, which is
yeah, let's
unfortunately
see.
how it goes.
The budget was 1.5 million. It made 2.4 million at the box office. Shit.
That's you know what all things considered, if he broke even on it, well, you can say that was a success and you got a movie out there. So I can't really begrudge him that. Like he funded the film out of his own pocket, and he clearly, this is something he wanted to make. I didn't feel like, because when you said you wanted to talk about death of the author in relation to this film, I thought this was a really difficult film to do it with, because I think that this film is so clearly tied in with his own experience and personality and ego in the way it's produced. Like, say, the director of This Is England, he made This Is England based on his own experiences, but it's not a stand-in for his life. It was, I grew up in Thatcher era Britain, and this is what I experienced. Stories like this. Whereas this felt like a rant.
Mm-hmm.
And and there are some things that are in there that I feel, in hindsight, things that I the first time round watching it I kind of liked. I'm now not sure why they were there, other than to be artsy, like when the dad takes Christina Ricci back into his room, and thank the Lord he doesn't fuck her, but he sings to her instead, and the lighting changes, and it's like there's a stage light on him, and I thought that, again, for someone who didn't want to be compared to David Lynch, that was a lot like the scene in Blue Velvet where the villain sings the Roy Orbison song, or lip syncs to the Roy Orbison song. But I don't. Maybe there is a good reason for it being there, and I'm just not seeing it. But
that was actually performed by Vincent Gallo's father, and my understanding is that was just a way to, like, plug his dad's old music or whatever.
Really, is that the only reason?
Maybe it was that so I would think, on an autobiographical level, if I had to guess, it was that his dad was the way he was because he was constantly pining away for a past that was interrupted by him becoming a family man and all that. That I can understand, but that needed to be cut out of the film. I fast forward through it every time. It's a garbage scene that has nothing to do
Yeah,
with anything.
I'll give his dad credit. I mean, his dad's got a good voice,
Yeah,
but
I just didn't want to hear it. I wanted to
yeah, I
get
just
on with the fucking movie.
and the way
But it did. I'm sorry to interrupt.
yeah.
It led to one of my favorite moments where, or no, that didn't lead into one of my favorite moments. What was? Oh no, it was when he was on the phone. I'm thinking of the part where Layla tells the mom that she's having. She goes way overboard in making this shit up. See, this is what I love about that character. She's weird. You do get a sense of who she is. She's making up all these fantastical stories
I
off
did
the top
love
of her
the.
head.
Sorry, I did love that scene though, from like a blocking's perspective when they're looking at, when the way they're looking and she's telling the story of how they met, and Angelica Houston is like clearly looking not at the camera, not at Vincent Gallo, but like off at the TV.
The TV.
The
Yeah.
dad is looking anywhere but. And she's just looking all over the place because she knows
Yeah.
that no one in the fucking room is paying attention to her
Yep.
at all, and she can say whatever the fuck she wants.
Yep. And the stuff that she makes up is so wild and fantastic. But my favorite culmination in that scene is when Billy comes back and Angelica Houston goes, "Oh, honey, you're gonna have a baby." It's like, of course, like the second that he came back, she was gonna break her promise and tell him. And this is another thing where going with the getting to the death of the author thing. The author was dead when I saw this. And the author can't really be dead anymore because we didn't have Wikipedia then. We didn't have, I guess you could read things in newspapers, but who the fuck did that when they were 17? So the author was dead when I saw this. So I had a completely different, if this was an autobiographical thing, I couldn't have been aware of it. So what I saw were parents that reminded me of most of my friends' parents, people that reminded me of people that I actually knew, and this overarching message that it was exactly what I said at the beginning. If you're screwed up, if you had a screwed up life, somebody out there is going to get you, and go with that instead of the murder suicide. You know, I thought that all tied together perfectly. It is a real shame, considering if you take the knowledge of this being this guy's, as you say, rant about himself, if you take that out of the experience, it's such a good, well put together delivery device for that particular message and that particular aspect of what love is. It is a real shame that this is, exactly as you said, the hardest thing to do that with, because there's so much of him personally in this, and he's such a complete fuckhead.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like when I watch him in it, I went back and forth between whether or not I thought he was a good actor, and I came down on the side of, yeah, I do think he's a good actor.
I think he's a good actor, yeah.
Because on one hand, you could say and be completely correct that he's literally playing himself. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if I got a random person off the street and said, just be yourself on camera, they couldn't do it. They couldn't,
yeah, for sure.
They couldn't deliver lines how they naturally would do it. Even I have difficulty with that. Like, if I'm doing a scene, I might have trouble, and I start acting instead of being. And the one thing I will say for him is that he is very good at just being.
Just behaving. Yes, I agree with that 100%. Yeah. I was actually going to just say he's a good actor. I think he's a good... And one of the things that I haven't
seen anything else. So
yeah, me either. Yeah. Sure, but he was good in this. And one of the things that I always hone in on when I ask myself if somebody's a good actor is how they handle phone calls when they're just talking to nobody. He's so good in those, and he talks on the phone a lot. He gets into the conversation the way that somebody who's talking to somebody on the phone does. He's really good with phone conversations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I agree. That is something that I will say for him. I don't think he's a particularly good storyteller, but I do think that he had skill as an actor, that he is no longer able to
See, I
demonstrate.
yeah,
But
no shit. See, I would be tempted to say that I think he is a good storyteller, at least in this movie, if I thought that it was not Alison Bagnall who was telling the story instead of him. I mean, he's good at. It's so it's hard now because when this whole segment was going to be about me saying, well, he's a really really bad person, and this was everything that you said, but I think he made a great movie. I actually talking to you about this and the other people that were involved, I'm not sure he did make a great movie anymore. I think two other people made a great movie, or what I consider to be a great movie.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Because if you think whether or not you think it is or isn't a great movie doesn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily mean that he made the great movie. And on one
Yeah,
hand, I could see someone out there who really, really likes, really, really, really likes this guy. And I gotta say, we probably wouldn't get along very well. But
yeah, no, probably no, yeah, for
if
sure.
someone loves Vincent Gallo, they might think we're being a little like short with him. Like, you're just saying this because he's an arsehole and you don't want to give him the credit. But I think we've given him some credit here.
No, and you know what? I want to anybody who might say that, very little of what we've been talking about have been his like outlandish public statements about not selling his sperm to black people or whatever. It's really how he treated his actors and how he treated the professionals that were around him. That's what I don't like about him. That's why I'm glad he can't really get work in Hollywood, because nobody should have to take abuse, real abuse, in order to make a movie or do anything professionally. Nobody should have to take abuse.
There was a video that I saw by someone called Maggie Mae Fish, who I guess I'll semi plug, where she talks about the two auteur directors, David Lynch and Stanley Kubrick, and the complete difference in how they treat their cast, in spite of being considered two of the greatest filmmakers of all time. Stanley Kubrick, famously abusive, famously abusive. You know, screamed Shelley Duvall into basically being insane.
Yeah, yeah,
And on the other hand, you have David Lynch, who has, I've got to say, he has filmed some graphic scenes of sexual assault. He has filmed some horrid, uncomfortable scenes. And no one has ever said anything about working with him other than that he made them feel safe when they did it.
yeah,
Everyone who's ever
yeah,
worked
yeah.
with him has said that they didn't feel exploited. They didn't feel like upset. They didn't feel scared. That he was always able to make horror safe for those actors. You can do it without being
You
awful.
can. You absolutely can. I'm thinking of it just popped into my head. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when it's not really a situation of abuse, but when you had the little kid and his face was supposed to light up whenever he would see like the aliens or whatever,
Yeah,
and the kid just looked so natural. He just had a guy in the back. I think he had a clown or something in the background who would like walk into the scene in the background, and the kid would like smile at. Yeah, you find ways to get
yeah.
these reactions out of people that don't involve actually abusing them, like I'm thinking now of James Cameron, where he nearly drowned fucking what's her name like
Kate
several
Winslet.
times. Yeah,
Yeah.
Kate Winslet. Yeah, just fuck that. Or fuck, who was the guy? God damn it, Metropolis. Um,
Oh, you're going back so far that I'm not sure his name either.
Fritz Lang, where he
Fritz
nearly
Lang,
drowned the
yes.
little children and wanted them to be cold and freezing so that they would be natural. Yeah,
Yeah.
fuck that. Fuck
Spielberg
that.
Spielberg is famously good at working with children. Fritz
Yes.
Lang is not.
Is famously almost child murder. He probably murdered his wife. Yeah,
There was
just fuck that. Nobody should feel real abuse or that kind of discomfort for fucking
yeah.
movies. Well, there's interestingly, Christina Ricci told a story on her Instagram recently about she was 13 years old. She was making a movie called Gold Diggers, and
Mm-hmm.
her mom and her minders were there. And it was a scene where her stunt person was going to fill in, and they had her in this they were going to put the stunt person in this harness and swing her across this ravine, and she was supposed to stop short and kind of scramble up the hill or whatever. And the director was like, "Oh, come here, Christina. We want to talk to you over here about what's going to happen in this scene." So they took her away from her mom and away from her minder, and strapped her into the harness and said, "Okay, you're going to swing across this thing and you got to scramble up, but it's okay. It's all going to work out fine." And they literally were like, "Okay, call action," before anybody realizes what happens. They pushed her across the thing. It was really traumatic for her, and her mom and her minder called SAG and basically shut down the production because a 13-year-old should never have done a stunt like that.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Okay,
so,
right.
yeah,
Everyone, roll action before anyone knows that we're going to push this
before,
kid
before her
into the...
mom finds out that we're putting her life in danger for a
before
shot,
the mum
you
before
fucks.
before the mum finds out that we're throwing her into the Grand Canyon.
Yes! Fuck! I couldn't believe that. How do you, like, filmmakers, don't even get me started on the who's the guy?
Ooh.
He made the he made the Blues Brothers and a whole bunch of stuff, and he did that
Oh yes, yeah, John Landis.
John Landis, who
Yeah.
killed children. And
Yes.
fuck, I gotta tell you that, first of all, and I've said many a times, obviously nobody should be dying for fucking movies.
Nope.
But I wanted to know more about that incident because I remember hearing about it when I was a little kid, but nobody would tell me exactly what happened because it was so ghastly. And I wanted to know more about it recently. So I typed it into Google and I saw a YouTube video, and I saw those people actually die. And that was actually a traumatic thing for me to witness. That
Yeah,
was
no kidding.
horrible. And I had no idea I was about to see that. I saw a helicopter fall on human beings while they were drowning. That was horrible.
Yep.
What a fucking... How is he not in a prison?
Yeah, he got away with it. He got away with it, and it was just complete negligence. His son Max Landis, who has got his own set of controversies that are not relevant to this today, but his son actually said about how before he'd say something, he'd have like an unpopular opinion about a film, and then people come at him going, "Your dad killed children." But he said that he was at a cinema going to see a film, and then with his dad, and then a guy just shouted across from him about the incident making the Twilight Zone movie, and his dad just like got like rattled and jittery, and he wasn't the same for days after. And and he did. It was just stupid negligence, and well, I mean, I guess like the Alec Baldwin thing on the set of, was it a film called Rust?
Rust, yeah.
Yeah, like
that's different.
Because I noticed a lot of people trying to say, you know, you were the producer of the film, so the buck stops at you. But I kind of feel like that's the job of the prop and set department, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was a similar situation with the Twilight Zone. I don't know all the ins and outs. I don't know if it's like literally a case of it's his fault or not. But I know that was like awful, and that has apparently, like, he's never been over it.
Well, he shouldn't, because
no.
I think in those two different cases. So my understanding of the Twilight Zone incident is that he got children who were not in SAG and not that were like, I think they were like undocumented children. He was trying to get around the child labor laws because he wanted to shoot this thing at night, and he so he hired these children, and he was doing this dangerous thing, and you can see the guy, and I don't like remembering what I saw, but you can see the guy, he's trying to hold on to the kids, and he drops one, and then he goes into the water to save him, and the fucking helicopter falls on him, because he was doing all this shit with this helicopter scene at night that should never have been done. That was 100%, he wanted that shot to happen, and he tried to make it happen, and he ended up killing 3 people to try and get the shot that he wanted to get. That's my understanding of that one. My understanding of the Rust incident is that Alec Baldwin is absolutely liable in civil court for what happened, for anybody who wants to come after him civilly, because he is responsible, or at least partly responsible, for the personnel that they hired. But on a movie set, you have a prop master or armor or whatever they call it now for a reason, and that ultimately, the person who allowed that weapon to be put in his hand and pointed at another person after saying that it was empty is ultimately like responsible morally and criminally. Like there's just no other way to view it.
Yeah, no, no fair, no fair. So, that was our discussion on Buffalo 66 and some other stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye for me, and tune in next time when we will talk about another movie. I have several in mind that I will bring up, and if you're watching this, if you happen to come across this little video, put in the comments, what movie do you want us to talk about?
See you next week.
Bye!